Welcome, everybody. This is Jimmy Lin with HeatPressNation. I'm joined here today with Jimmy Lamb at Sawgrass Technologies, our partner there. We're today talking in this webinar about the new sublimation printers produced by Sawgrass, the Virtuoso SG400 and SG800. We're going to have an educational webinar today talking about all the details, all the upgrades, and the specifications of that printer, as well as the Creative Studio software that comes with the design software. And so with that, introducing Jimmy Lamb.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. Glad to be here. And as you said, we're going to look at the Virtuoso printer system and all the details that go with it. So we got a lot of good information to cover here. If at any time you want to ask questions, please feel free to do so. So Virtuoso is our subject today, and what exactly is Virtuoso? Well, Virtuoso is actually a complete system, and it has multiple components. Now, the printer is like the central part and the part that gets a lot of attention when we talk about Virtuoso printers, et cetera, et cetera. But it really is a three-part system, okay? And it's the first fully integrated HD product decorating system developed specifically for sublimation and, of course, developed by Sawgrass. Now, it consists of the Virtuoso printers, of which there's two models, the SG400 and the SG800. As well, it has the SubleJet HD sublimation ink, which was developed specifically for these printers. And then the third part is the Creative Studio, which is an online design program for sublimation. And we're going to look a little deeper at that and actually at every item on the list there. So that's what the system is composed of. The Virtuoso printers, the SubleJet HD sublimation inks, and the Creative Studio online designer. Now, the SG400 and SG800 Virtuoso printers are the only desktop printers built for digital printing. You know, traditionally at Sawgrass, we would take a look at printers that are in the marketplace, look at their tech specs, of course, because they do have to be compatible with our sublimation inks, and then we would put together sublimation inks that could work within those particular printers. So we were always engineering our inks to work with someone else's printer. The neat thing about the Virtuoso is we built these in conjunction with our partner Ricoh specifically for digital decorating, and in this case, for our discussion today, sublimation. Now, one of the neat things is you can get up to 1200 by 1200 DPI output for HD photo quality reproduction with both these printers, and that's a significantly higher level of output than what you had with the Ricoh systems. We also are seeing faster throughput, which means greater productivity and a potential for more profits. Now, we're going to look deeper at these printers as we go. I'm still giving you just basic overview of what Virtuoso is all about. The ink is the SubleJet HD ink, and it was engineered specifically for the SG400 and SG800. Actually, they were all put together as one big project, but this particular ink is the next generation of our SubleJet ink. Now, some of you have the Ricoh system. Ricoh printers, excellent printers. The Ricoh 3110, the Ricoh 7100 are the last generation of those and proven to be a very reliable platform. If you look at the image on the left, it was printed with a Ricoh printer using SubleJet R ink. If you look at the image on the right, it was printed with a Virtuoso printer using the SubleJet HD ink. And taking a quick comparison at these two, you can see, even on a webinar platform, you can see that the one on the right, the colors are a little more vivid. And that's one of the things that we're seeing with our SubleJet HD ink. More vivid color, a greater range of color. In addition, a higher yield for lower imaging costs, and an expanded gamut for more vibrant and more accurate colors. So SubleJet HD ink is our next generation of sublimation inks, and they're available specifically for the SG400 and SG800 printers. And then finally, we do have the designer, the Creative Studio designer. Now, this is an online program. I'm going to tell you more about what that means exactly. And it was created specifically for putting together images to use in sublimation production. We put together a stock design library so that you'd have a lot of really good artwork to choose from. We put together art templates for those of you like me who are not graphic designers and need something creative and exciting but just can't seem to do it yourself. So we have tons of art templates that you can work with, and you can modify the components with those art templates, for your specific need, and then apply it to a very specific substrate. We took templates from manufacturers of lots of different sublimation substrates, and we installed them into the Creative Studio program to make this a very easy, short process to be able to go from an idea to actually setting it up and then printing it. In addition, we put together some new color management and printer drivers as part of the designer setup, and we designed this color management system to work hand in hand with the Creative Studio system. So those two components work really well together, and then they're also engineered to work with the Virtuoso printer. So this is a neat program. It's a multi-piece system that has those three key ingredients to it. So let's get a little deeper now. That's a general overview. But what are Virtuoso printers really all about? What are some of the specs with these printers? How do they compare against previous generation Ricoh printers? Well, the SG400 and SG800 are based on proven Ricoh platforms. This was a joint effort between Ricoh and Sawgrass, meaning that we had some input on the printers themselves, on how the printers were put together, because we wanted to make sure that these printers really were put together specifically for the needs of our customer base. And we started with some of those great features that you found with the existing Ricoh printers, such as auto maintenance. Auto maintenance meaning that if you leave it plugged in and turned on, okay, that it can actually take care of itself. It can actually check the heads and periodically do some head checks, which is kind of interesting because if you're new to that and you have your printer sitting there nearby, all of a sudden out of the blue, it'll sound like it's getting ready to print. And that's just going through some of its auto maintenance procedures. But it's always kind of weird, like, hey, what's going on with that printer? Is there someone else in here doing some printing that I don't know about? Okay, so that's been a great feature with Ricoh, and definitely have that within the Virtuoso printers as well. And then we also looked at the technology of printing. And when you look at an inkjet printer, you're putting out a series of dots to be able to create your images and print them onto paper. So if you can control those dots and put in more precise dots, you can have more accurate printing, and you can have a higher level of printing and a higher quality output. And those are some of the advances that have been made with the Virtuoso printer as well. So there's a lot going on underneath the cover that takes these printers to a new level. Now, if you look at the combination of these printers along with the SubleJet HD ink, you're going to see you get several new benefits over the Ricoh models. Let's start with Gamut. Now, for those of you who don't know what Gamut is, any device that works with color, in this case specifically printers, but even things like computer monitors and digital cameras, etc., they work within a range of color gamut, meaning basically the colors that they can reproduce and work with. There's really no system out there that can reproduce every color there is, or every color variation. But if we take a look here, we're going to see that the Virtuoso does have a wider color gamut than the previous Ricohs, about 25% more colors. If you look at the Ricoh printers, and specifically the Ricoh 3110, the Ricoh 7100, their maximum output is 600 by 600 DPI, and they would produce about 547,000 colors. Okay, that's a lot of colors. Can you imagine I have a color chart that had 547,000 colors on there? Then we start looking at the SG printers, and if you take the SG printers and you run them in the 600 by 600 DPI printing mode, you're going to get about 646,000 colors out of it. On the other hand, if you set it for the highest quality output of 1200 by 1200 DPI, you can get up to 687,000 colors, and that's pretty amazing. So you can see we're definitely getting a wider range of color. We're getting more vivid colors with the Virtuoso system. We're also seeing better blues and reds. So just across the board, the blues and reds are looking a little sharper and a little brighter. We're also having reduced wear on the heads, and the system is more environmentally friendly than ever before. There's also more efficient ink yield per cart, meaning that we get a little more coverage for each cartridge of ink. For the SG400, that's about 11% increase, but with the SG800, that's a 25% increase, and that can be pretty significant that you're able to actually get that much more yield out of an ink cart. And that all comes down to the technology of the printer combined with the ink itself to be able to get that type of improvement in performance. So let's look at each one individually, and we'll start with the SG400. Now, the SG400 evolved from the Ricoh 3110, and it's an ideal startup unit. By the way, I want to mention here that at Sawgrass, we have not discontinued support for the Ricoh models, and we've not discontinued ink. So if you've already bought a Ricoh model and you're happy with the performance of it, we will still be able to provide you support and ink, as we always have for those systems. Okay, so please just be aware of that. The Virtuoso is the next generation of printer, but if you have a Ricoh, you have an excellent printer that can do a lot of good things for you. Okay, so the SG400 works with multiple operating systems. It works with PC and it works with Mac. The Creative Studio aspect, and we'll talk more about Creative Studio, we really haven't covered much with it yet, but the Creative Studio aspect works not only with PC and Mac, but also iOS and Android. So the Creative Studio is based online, but you're able to access it through several different types of operating systems to be able to work with it. Now, looking at the image over here on the lower right-hand corner, this is our test image, and we use that as a reference for some of the numbers you see down below. Estimated ink cost for that image is 60 cents with this particular printer. This particular printer comes with a maximum media size, a standard maximum media size of 8.5 by 14 inches. In reality, with the optional bypass tray, and it is optional, you could produce or work with paper up to 8.5 by 51. Now, I don't know anybody that's making 51-inch length paper. Okay, I know 8.5 by 14 is pretty standard. Anything beyond that, not sure it's there yet. But think of the possibilities, because now that the capability is there, we'll probably see some paper manufacturers come up with some longer lengths of paper that can be used with this optional bypass tray. Now, where would you use something like 8.5 by, let's not say 51, but maybe 8.5 by, say, 21? Doing socks. If you're going to do sock production, that tends to be long and narrow. So that can be an advantage there. So hopefully we're going to see some people take advantage of the fact that we do have the capability to handle some longer lengths of paper. Now, your maximum print output of that particular image is 156 prints per hour. And that's with our high-speed setting, and that's going to give you 600 by 600 DPI. We have 3 settings for this series of printers. We have our high speed, which gives you great quality and high speed, and that could get you 156 prints per hour at 600 by 600 DPI with that image. We have a high quality setting. Now, the high quality setting gives you even better quality output, but at a little bit lower speed. Okay, so you'll be able to get 72 prints per hour at 600 by 600 DPI. And then we have our advanced photos selection, which is really designed for ultra high level pro photo type of output, and you would get 22 prints per hour at 1200 by 1200 DPI. So as you're going up in that quality level, you are coming down in speed, but those are still some really good numbers that we have there. Now, as always, when you're buying a printer, you know, the question always becomes, what is it you want to do? I mean, people will say, hey, Jimmy, what printer should I buy? And I say, what is it you want to do? And size is the key factor for me if I'm looking at a printer and considering the types of things I'm going to produce. Now, for this example here, I'm showing that with an 8.5 by 14 sheet of paper, you could probably get 6 iPhone covers printed out on 1 sheet of paper, or potentially 6 coasters on 1 sheet of paper. So you're able to gang up some images. If you're going to work with apparel, you can get images for apparel, but you may not be able to make them as large as you would like because you're limited with 8.5 by 14 paper. It's also worth mentioning that when you're talking about printing on paper, these are paper sizes, but your maximum print field is slightly smaller because printers don't go to the edge of the paper. So typically they can get within about a ½ inch of the edges of the paper. So that would make a 7.5 by 14 be more like an 8.5 by 14 would probably be closer to 7.5 by 13, maybe in our total field that we can actually print. So you're not losing a lot there, but yes, 8.5 by 14, max paper size, print field slightly less. Now, having a comparison here between the SG400 versus the Ricoh 3110, because the SG400 looks a lot like the 3110, and the 3110 was the predecessor of which this platform was built and was based on. So if we take a quick look at the two, there's a lot of similarities. Both of them had a maximum media size of 8.5 by 14. The SG400, though, has the optional bypass tray, which could give you, in theory, up to 8.5 by 51. The max print speed is where you really see a difference in the 400 over the 3110. Our max print speed is 156 prints per hour using that image you just saw a few minutes ago. Whereas with the Ricoh 3110, it's only about 82 prints per hour. So you can see that the SG400 is blazingly faster than the Ricoh 3110. Your image cost, image ink cost for that particular image we were looking at, done as an 8-inch by 10-inch, is about 60 cents for the 400 and 68 cents for the 3110. MSRP, by the way, that is not necessarily the selling price that Jimmy Lin is going to be offering you for this printer. This is just an MSRP, okay? And the MSRP recommended for both units is about the same, $550. So you can see similarities and differences between the two. So let's take a closer look at the SG800, which is larger than the 400. The SG800 evolved from the Ricoh 7100, and it's an ideal unit for apparel and larger substrate production. You know, really, we recommend to people buy the smallest printer that will print the largest image that you need, okay? In other words, if you really don't need to print 44-inch wide images, you don't need a 44-inch printer, even though you might be excited by it, okay? So the reality is, to get the most efficiency out of a printer, you buy the smallest printer or print the largest image that you need. And you got to think about what's the largest image, okay? What's the largest standalone image I need to reproduce on a regular basis, okay? That'll help you some with the size, and you'll understand more what I mean here as we go a little bit further. Okay, just like with the SG400, it works with multiple operating systems, both PC and Mac, and the Creative Studio aspect works with several different operating systems as well. Estimated image ink cost for this image with this printer is 35 cents. It was 60 cents with the SG400. The SG800 is more, it's a little less, it's at 35 cents. Maximum standard media size is 11 inches by 17 inches for this particular printer, but with the optional bypass tray, in theory, 13 by 51. Reality, 13 by 19 is probably the only paper you're going to find right now, but yeah, there is that capability to be able to do longer sheets of paper if they become available from the companies that make paper. Our maximum print output is pretty much the same as the SG400. At high speed setting, 156 prints, 600 by 600 DPI. The high quality setting, 72 prints per hour, 600 by 600 DPI, and the advanced photo is 22 prints at 1200 by 1200. So again, that blazing fast speed. Now, looking at what we can output here, we could actually get, because we're using larger papers, we can produce more of the same thing at the same time when we talk about smaller substrates like the iPhone covers. The maximum was about 6 per sheet with the SG400. It's 12 using an 11 by 17 paper with the SG800. And if you're using 13 by 19, you can get even more. It's the same thing with the coasters over there. And then you can see you have a larger area printing for you dealing with apparel because you can cover larger areas. But this is where we really look at is not necessarily how many pieces can individual small things can I put on one sheet of paper, but really this becomes your real defining factor. I can do multiple phone covers with smaller paper. Okay, just maybe not as many as this sheet of paper. But the one thing that you really can't get around is the maximum image size here. Okay, if you're going to work with apparel and you need bigger images, then you need a bigger printer. If you're just strictly looking at being able to do 4 of something at a time instead of 2, depending on what that is, maybe the smaller printer is better. You really got to kind of figure that out for yourself. So these are just ideas for you to understand that buying different size printers can give you some different production outputs along the way. Now, looking at the SG800 versus its predecessor, the Ricoh 7100, both of them, their maximum standard media size is 11 by 17. If you get the bypass tray option with the SG800, in theory, you can go to 13 by 51, but it's probably just going to be doing 13 by 19. With the Ricoh 7100 with the bypass tray, 13 by 19 is the largest paper size you can handle. Speed is where you see the big difference again. Using that image you just saw a minute ago at an 8-inch by 10-inch size, you can do 156 prints per hour with the SG800 versus 69 prints per hour with the 7100. And the image cost is less, 35 cents when you're running at that output versus 46 cents. Your MSRP, again, it's just an MSRP. It's about the same. I think the Ricoh 7100 was around $16.25 and the 800 around $16.50. Very, very close together there. The big difference is in speed, and earlier as we were looking in the output gamut or color range. Now, printing with Virtuoso. With the Virtuoso printer, there's 2 different ways that you can create designs and send to the printer. As I said, the Virtuoso system includes a Creative Studio sublimation software system, and it comes at no charge. Okay, there's no charge for Creative Studio. Now, Creative Studio is actually a web-based application. So the actual Creative Studio Designer is on the internet or up in the cloud. And I'm going to give you a demo of how that works here in just a minute. When you work with it, you're always working with it online. All the images you create are stored online. You have your own admin folder that's password protected by you. Everything you work with stored online. When you get ready to print, you will set it up to print, and your image will be converted to a proprietary file that is then coming down out of the cloud and into a small software application that you've installed on your local computer. And that's called the Creative Studio Print and Color Manager. And it has basically a printer driver in there, a color management. It's able to process what you create in Creative Studio. So you create it here, and it downloads into your Creative Studio Print and Color Manager, and then it goes over into the printer and prints out. If you'd rather work with Corel and Photoshop and Illustrator, standard graphics programs, a lot of that software you do install directly onto your system, even though they do have internet versions now. But when you work with traditional graphics programs, you create your images, and if you're a Windows user, you're then going to download that image from your program to PowerDriver 4, and then it's going to send it to the printer. So there's 2 different pathways that images follow depending on how they were created. If you're working with Creative Studio, you have to install a Creative Studio Print and Color Manager. If you're working with standard graphics programs, you install the PowerDriver 4 if you're a Windows user, and we'll show Mac here in just a moment. You can have both these printer drivers installed on the same computer. They do not have any problems being there together. Okay, they do not interfere with each other. But it's important to understand that with Virtuoso, you can use Creative Studio, but Creative Studio only works for Virtuoso. Okay, Creative Studio does not work with Ricoh printers or Epson printers. Creative Studio only works with Virtuoso printers. But Virtuoso printers also work with standard graphics programs such as Corel, Photoshop, and Illustrator. So it's just as versatile as any of the other printers as far as that goes. So it's very important to understand that. Another thing I want to point out, and just try and give you a brief explanation here, the images that are included with Creative Studio, and there's a whole library, and you're going to see some of that in just a moment, of stock images included. It comes part of the system, doesn't cost you anything, but they are licensed like anything else. And so due to the licensing issues, the images can only be used to print out onto products for resale. So you would take those images, you print them out, you sublimate them with something, you can go sell those products all day long, okay? But the actual image files themselves, the rights are retained with the creator, and you can't take those images that are being used out of here and go apply them to other things outside of sublimation, like screen printing or whatever else, because the license doesn't cover that. Therefore, all of the stock images are stored online because of the proprietary nature, but you're able to print out through a sublimation printer those images and then sell products with those images on them, but you don't have access to the actual image files themselves, which is very standard licensing anyway. Okay, may sound a little complex, but that's just the way copyright issues are. Now, if you happen to be a Mac user, your setup's almost identical. As a Mac user, you're still going to use the same Creative Studio in the cloud, but you're going to install the Mac version of Creative Studio Print and Color Manager. If you're working with standard graphics programs, you would output to a Mac profile for helping you match or maintain color, and then it'll go through the printer driver and into the printer. So even with a Mac system, you can still use your same printer with either types of graphic setups. Okay, so a lot of good options there, and we just want you to be aware that you do have those options. Some of you may not ever use Creative Studio, even though it comes, with your system at no charge. Others may absolutely love it, but it doesn't matter. You can use your printer with pretty much any graphics program out there. All right, so I'm going to switch gears here. I'm not done. It looks like we're done. I'm not done. I'm going to go and take you online, and I'm going to introduce you to Creative Studio so you can see an idea of how it actually works. So give me just a moment here while I get that part set up. And there we go. So as I was saying, Creative Studio is online designer, meaning it's online obviously, and all the design work is done online, and the print work is done through your local printer. Now, one of the neat things about this is if you have a tablet and you want to go work directly with your customer, you could take your tablet, log on online, and work with the customer to create a design. And I know a lot of times that sounds scary, okay, letting the customer have too much input. But Creative Studio is easy enough to use that, the customer probably would enjoy the opportunity. And it's not complex where you're going to get lost in it. Okay, I mean, if I had to sit down with a customer with something like CorelDRAW, I would be very nervous because they'd start wanting to know what every single button did, and I don't know that answer. So we also found that the average user of a graphic software knows only about 20 to 25% of the functionality of that software. Typically, people learn just enough to be able to produce things, but they don't always get really good at it because they just don't have the time. So, the thing about Creative Studio is we try to limit it, to that 20% range. So we don't have every function in Creative Studio that you have in Corel or some of the other programs. Creative Studio is not meant to be a graphic designer where you create things from scratch. It is not meant to compete with Corel or Photoshop or anything of that nature. It is meant to be an easy-to-use program that allows you to combine text and images into unique layouts and then apply them to product-specific templates so that you can easily print out those images and then go sublimate them on there. It is very product-centric. It's product-driven, as you're going to see as we go into this. But it is not meant to compete with those other programs. Okay, if you want to do really fancy special effects and text effects, you're not going to get that with this particular program. But as you'll see, you can still create some really nice stuff. Okay, you cannot access Creative Studio unless you bought Virtuoso because it only works for Virtuoso. So if you're buying your Virtuoso system, you will register your system, and when you register your system, you will also gain access to Creative Studio. I have access, so I'm going to go right on in. So it's going to be a little slow going in because I'm on the internet driving this webinar as well as using this internet product. So I'm using a lot of bandwidth. So let me go ahead and log on in here. Yeah, another nice thing about this is we put a lot of work into making it easy to learn. So we have a tremendous amount of tutorial videos, how-to videos, troubleshooting videos, so that at any time that you're working on something, you need a quick answer, you can go into our video library and you can find a lot of times 30-second answers to stuff. So we have a tremendous amount of information in there. Also, we have tech support for Creative Studio 24/7 since this program is used on an international level. A lot of different time zones there. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch it. And when we launch it, the opening window is going to include something called the product wizard. As I was saying, this is product driven. We have gone and loaded in a tremendous amount of product templates so that you're working with the product. You're choosing a product to begin with. Now, if you can't find your product in the product list, or you're working with something totally different, you can always work what we call a blank design canvas to be able to create what you want. But looking at the drop-down list, we have a lot of different products in here, and these are real-life products. They have part numbers and everything, okay? So for fun, let's see, why don't we do, I'm going to do an award plaque, you know, just so I can show you a non-apparel type of thing and some of the features for that. So I'm going to go to awards and plaques, and then I'm going to click next here, and it's going to take me to where I can get the product list. And we are updating. We keep adding more and more products in here, but you can see these are real products. So I'm going to go with the 8x10 plaque here. Click next. This plaque is available in 2 colors. Well, it's mostly white, but the edges of it can be either black or cherry. That looks kind of like brown, but it's supposed to be cherry, okay? I'm going to go with the cherry and click next. Then I need to decide, is it going to be a horizontal or a vertical type of layout? And this is just, the reason we're asking that is it helps us to orientate everything the right way, including some of the artwork when we use the templates, you'll see in just a moment. And then I'm also going to specify, I'm going to use vertical. I'm going to specify the paper I'm using, which is letter vertical. And I'm going to click Start Designer. And what it does is it brings, first of all, on the screen, an image of this particular product. Now, if you've worked with sublimation, you understand about putting in bleeds with your artwork. If you've never worked with sublimation, let me explain that real quick. When we're working with products such as this, which is a plaque, many times we have a solid background or some type of background that we make it a full bleed, meaning it goes from one edge to the other of the printable area of the product. Now, everything that you see white here represents the sublimatable area of this plaque, this very specific plaque. But we typically make the artwork slightly larger than the actual printable area. And we do this because it makes it easier to line things up. Because when you're mating up that paper with that image to that particular product, in this case a plaque, it gives you some visual references of making sure you get everything centered just the right way. So we usually make it a little bit larger. Okay. Also, if you're just a hair a bit off center, usually it doesn't affect anything because you have a little bit of overbleed all the way around. So these particular templates, most of them already have that built in. Now, if you look at this one closely, there's a black line, a wide black line, maybe you even want to call it a column, going all the way in around, and it's located really between the white area and the cherry area. Okay, so you see that black in there? The white area is the true printable area of the plaque in question. But we're going to make our artwork so it goes out here to the far edge of the black, right where the black meets the brown, so that we have, excuse me, black meets the cherry. See, it looks brown too. It's going to go out right to that edge there so that our artwork is slightly larger to help us line everything up. And that's a very powerful feature of this particular system. Okay, now to get started, you could do something like just start with text and put your own text in there. You could go straight to the image library and start choosing images, and the image library is pretty big. Okay, it's got a lot of categories. I mean, I'm telling you, there's hundreds and hundreds of images, great quality images here for sublimation. Or you can actually upload one. You want to upload your own image, whether it's a picture, whether it's a graphic or whatever, you would go here, you would go find it on your hard drive, and you would upload it, okay? And then it would be stored in another folder called My Images. A lot of times when we do that, I don't know about you, but me, when we put an image and text on something, it looks like an image and text. In other words, it doesn't always have a lot of pizzazz. So to make it a little bit easier for you guys that aren't graphic designers like me, we have our art templates. And so if you click on art templates, you're going to get this big drop-down list of all kinds of templates, okay? And these are starting points, and you can modify these templates as you need it. So I'm going to take the template here, and since I'm doing awards and plaques, I'm going to go to awards and plaques. I'm going to pick a sports theme. I'm going to go with this one right here. I'm going to click on it, and the system brings it right in. And on this particular item, not only did it bring it in, it actually lined it up the exact size I need going to the outer area of the bleed, okay? If you look close on your screen, you can see where that bleed part still is. So you can see it does extend all the way there. Now, the neat thing here, too, is you can't make something too big. Here, I just selected the whole thing, and watch what happens. If I start moving it, it cuts it off. So it forces it to be no larger than that maximum area with the bleed. Okay, you can't make it any larger than that. I mean, you can try, but you can't. Okay, and that's perfect. Okay, that's what you want. Okay, it's to help you and I not make simple mistakes that are easy to make. Okay, so suppose I really was sitting with a coach. Okay, and the coach, maybe he picked that one out. And he says, that's a good starting point, but we're a soccer team, not a football team. What can you do? Can you give me a soccer ball? I said, well, sure, let's find out. All these templates are made up of areas, and those are called objects. Okay, so each area that I can click on is an object. And if I can click on it, I can drag it to make it larger or smaller. Okay, if I can click on it, I can rotate it by grabbing that. I also have, let me click on it again. If I would rather use arrow keys for moving things, I can do that instead of dragging it. So I have a lot of different ways that I can manipulate the object. So as long as I can grab it, I can manipulate it. Some of the objects I can recolor. So you see I just clicked on this text, and you see over here that text is white. I can recolor it. I'll show you more about that in a minute. So some things I can recolor. I cannot recolor the football because the football happens to actually be a bitmap photograph. So it's not able to be able to edit the colors. But a lot of the graphics are vectors, and if they're vector graphics, you can change the colors within those as well just by clicking on it, looking at your choices. Okay, but I did click on the ball, and the ball is listed under here. We have an object list. This is built in layers. And so with the object list, you see ball, and I'm going to click replace. And when I click replace, it's going to automatically take me to the stock image library. And I'm going to go there. And he wanted a soccer ball, so let's find sports, football, soccer. And you can see we get a nice collection of designs showing up here. And I'm going to use the photo football soccer ball. And by clicking on it, it exchanged it with the previous image. Now, I'm going to be a little bit artsy. I'm going to move this over here to the corner. See how it cuts it off? I love that. Okay, and then I'm going to make it where it looks like it's jumping up out of the corner. It's pretty cool. Okay, so he's liking that, and he says, hey, that's pretty good, but you know what, Lorem Ipsum, we're not Lorem Ipsum High School. You got to change that. Well, that's just some stock text that was in there. They're the Brighton Tigers. So let's change that to Brighton. So I'm just typing in the new text. I click OK, and it changes the text while keeping the same font. If I wanted to change the font while that's selected, I would click on Object, since lettering is an object, and then I could go to Text Font, and you would see that with the text font, we have multiple categories of fonts, and within each category, there's multiple fonts available. So we're going to stick with that particular one that's still in there. Then he points out that their school colors don't contain blue, that their school colors like purple and orange. Okay, so he said, can you change the blue? Let's see, I can click on it. It's a selectable area. I clicked on it. You see over here in object colors, it's blue. I'm going to click on that. And this takes me to my color palette. Now, this is the basic color palette for this particular system. All of our graphics that are vector graphics were built using colors from the color palette, the standard color palette for this particular system, which takes into account the ink and the printer. So working with that baseline, I know there's a lot more colors available than this, okay? But these are just baseline colors that you can click on any one, and if you click on it, it will change the color of the area. Now remember, we were working with this background, which is blue. I want to make that purple, so I'm going to click on the purple. Now another way, if you don't see the color you need, you actually have this matrix over here, and you can move around and create a custom color. If you know an RGB code, you can type that in here. So you can certainly do that if you need to do that. Okay, it gives you that many more options. So let's go ahead and change this one to the same purple as well so that we're consistent. Coach is liking that, and he says, by the way, we weren't the state tournament champions, we were the district tournament champions. Can you change that? Sure, I can do that. So I'll go to district tournaments and click OK, and the change is made. Then he wants to put in his mascot, a tiger, okay? And I'm like, where are you going to fit a tiger, right? And so you got to start getting a little creative here. It's like, maybe if we move the lettering over to the right-hand side, we'll get a big area here we can put it. So I'm going to select the lettering here, and if I hold the Shift key while selecting, I can select multiple things temporarily, so I can move as a single group, and so that's what I did right here. And now I'm going to bring in our image. So we're going to go to Image, My Images, and I told you there's a lot of things in here. We're going to go to Mascots, Feline. Okay, that's where a tiger would be, right? So if you watch this populate, you can see there's a lot of versions of tigers in here. And I'm going to go ahead and choose this one. Now this is going to come in as its standard size, okay? It's not forced to any size. You just bring in an image. That's not a problem. I can click the corner and drag it right down to a more suitable size, and I can plug him in right here if I wish to do that. If you want to face the other way, we have the ability to do some flips, and we can flip them horizontally, flip them vertically. Of course, then he looks like he's dead, so let's not do that. So, you know, we can move it around and do whatever we want with it. By the way, while this is still selected, okay, look over here with object colors. I can actually change the colors, these 4 colors within that tiger, because that tiger was created as a vector. So we do have the ability to create or change those colors as we need it. Okay, so you can see that it's pretty easy to manipulate things and work with things and make changes to things. And then once you're satisfied with what you've done and you get ready to print it, first thing you're going to do is save it. So we're going to save this, and we're going to call it, we'll call it Tigers. You can set quantity to print here. I typically wouldn't. There is a certain situation where you would. We're not going to worry about it right now. If you want to save it as a new template, a new art template, you could. I don't see a need to actually do that. I'm going to click OK. And now it's been saved. It's in my admin folder. If I was working with a customer on a tablet, I can't print because I'm not with a printer. I'll take care of printing it later. But if I'm where I can actually print, then I can go up and click here to print, and this is going to activate my Print and Color Manager driver. And let me slide over where you can see it, because I have multiple screens that popped up on the other screen. But here it is. Okay, so this is prompting me to give it a little bit more information, like what is my substrate, and it does happen to be a Unisub product. You see we have different ones there. Which paper? I happen to be using TextPrint R. Now these are actually important, okay, because with color management takes into account the brand of the paper, the substrate you're working with, the ink, and the printer, all those things together, okay. This is where you would set the number of copies, you know, in most cases, right here. And it defaults to mirror. It normally prints it as a mirror image. If for whatever reason you don't want to, the only exceptions really are glass or acrylic. You would uncheck that. We also have our speed settings here. Remember, we discussed those there when we were looking at the PowerPoint slides. The high quality setting is a little slower, but really great quality. High speed is faster with still great quality, but this is even better quality, a little slower. And then you have advanced photo. Now, when you go to advanced photo, that's going to give you that 1200 by 1200 printing output. Definitely slow it down. But it also defaults to one type of substrate. It was designed to work with Chromolux products. Okay, so if you're working with Chromolux, you know, and you choose advanced photo, you're fine. If you're working with anything else, you probably don't get the advantage of the advanced photo if you're not using Chromolux products, okay? So the reality is you want really good printing on a variety of different substrates, just choose the high quality printing. If you're doing apparel, by the way, apparel is normally only done at high speed. So you can see polyester fabric is included there, but it's not included on high quality. You can still use that setting, but really with apparel, you don't get super high quality images anyway because of the nature of the substrate. Okay, so we'll leave it there at high speed. We can actually tweak the colors a little bit. When we come over and click the color tab, you really should choose what you're working with. And in graphic, this is mostly a graphic, not a photo. So I would choose graphic. And then you can actually tweak it. If you watch the image on the right, watch the colors change as I move the slider. Now I'm being really drastic so you can see, you know, clearly the kind of changes we're making. But you can tweak things with those sliders. Okay, you can tweak your baseline colors. You can also tweak your contrast and things like that as well. Okay, so you can make some adjustments and you'll see it happen here, and then you click print and it prints, which I'm not going to do because I don't need to print that. So there you have it. And that's also been saved. It's in your admin folder. You can go back and retrieve it and print it in as many times as you want. You can delete it. You can do whatever you want with it. It's there. So lots and lots of different products. As I said, this is very product centric. And I'm just going to show you real quick that product list again. You can see that we have a huge product list right here of things, everything you can see from blank design canvas to Chromolux products to flip-flops and coasters and garments, and the list is long, and then there's multiple items within every one of those. So very, very product centric. This is designed specifically for sublimation. Okay, that's what its purpose is. That's what it does, and that's what Creative Studio is all about. So just a quick recap. Virtuoso, the system, is composed of Virtuoso HD printers, the SG400, the SG800. It's also composed of the SubleJet HD ink, the high-def ink, and it's also composed of the Creative Studio Online Designer. And it's, of course, totally optional as to whether you use that Online Designer or not. By the way, the SubleJet HD inks only work with Virtuoso. They do not work with other printers. Okay, with all that said, I'm going to get Jimmy back in, and we'll take some of your questions here that you may have. And Jimmy, anything that you want to contribute here while I take a look at the questions, please go right ahead.
Great.
Okay, so again, if you have questions, you click on the red rectangle with the white arrow to open up your control panel and type it in, and it comes over to us. Are we going to be able to get the PowerPoint slides? No, but this has been recorded as a video, and I'll give the video to Jimmy, and he'll put it onto their website, and you'll be able to access it through there.
Yes, will be available on our YouTube channel within a day.
In regards to garments, can you print on darks and lights? With sublimation, you don't do darks. Okay, we do not have white ink capabilities for sublimation, so sublimation works best on white and light colors. The sublimation ink must always be substantially darker than the background color. So obviously, if you try to print, on a black shirt, there's not too much sublimation ink that's going to show up. So that is just one of the aspects of sublimation. Additional questions? Now, Jimmy, I mentioned some MSRP pricing. Do you have some pricing available for the SG400 and SG800?
Yeah, so the SG400 and the SG800 are sold as bundles typically, because when folks are purchasing these printers, they need an initial setup, and so we do sell the SG400 for $550, and what that includes is the printer, the software, of course, that you discussed thoroughly in the Creative Studio, the 4 cartridges of ink, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and then a full pack of TextPrint R paper, which is optimized specifically for this printer. For the SG800, the printer that is able to do larger format up to 13 by 19, that one is sold for $1,599. Same setup as well with the printer, the 4 cartridges of ink, the TextPrint R paper, as well as the Creative Studio software.
Excellent. And of course, you have, a moderate selection of heat presses.
Definitely so.
Is there a bulk ink system available? We do not have, really we don't do bulk ink systems for desktop printers in general. That we've done that in the past, but typically at this point we're putting together printers that have extended cartridges, larger than before, so that you don't have to change them out quite as often. But we don't have bulk ink system available for these.
If you are looking for higher volume, the SubleJet HD ink is available in the extended cartridges available on the site. Those are 60 milliliters. They move up from 29 milliliters to 60 milliliters, so it's a little bit easier that way.
Do you need to register for access to Creative Studio? Yes. Creative Studio is only available to Virtuoso users. When you go to register your printer and install your printing software, that's when you are able to set up your registration for access to Creative Studio. Here's a question for you, Jimmy. Is shipping availability immediate for printer bundles?
Yes, we actually have both of these fully available and in stock. In the beginning of the life cycle of these printers, they weren't the easiest printers to get a hold of. We sold them very quickly, but thankfully we received a full restock last week, and so we have plenty of them stocked currently.
Excellent. I put designs on sublimation mugs, and a customer of mine was wondering if we'd be able to do the same thing on metal thermos or Yeti thermoses. You can only sublimate to things that have a polymer coating, okay? So if there's a polymer coating, then you can sublimate it to it. And there are metal thermoses that have polymer coatings. But if there's not a polymer coating, then you cannot sublimate to it. Where do you get the optional paper bypass tray, and is it available now, and how much?
The bypass tray is definitely available, both for the SG400 and the SG800. We don't currently have them available on the site now, but they are available as a special order item. I'm not too sure about the price point on them, but they will be listed on the site shortly. I imagine within the next 3 days once we receive stock on those products, which are coming within those 3 days.
Is the Creative Studio program free forever, or do you have to pay every year? It's free. There's not a charge for it. Is there a chart for what's considered to be light and dark colors? No. You know, a lot of it is trial and error. Keep in mind that the majority of substrates for sublimation are manufactured with a white surface, because white is the best color. And therefore, you're able to, if you needed, for example, you wanted to make a red mouse pad, you wouldn't buy a red mouse pad, you'd buy a white mouse pad, and then you would create a graphic that has a red background with your graphic intertwined with that, and then you would go sublimate it one shot, and now you have a red mouse pad with whatever design you wanted. So that's typically how we're doing with sublimation. And most of the products are white to begin with, so we don't really have to worry about, color. We're just creating colors we need as we go.
You will notice when you get into apparel, like the vapor apparel product that we sell, you will notice that it does come in a rainbow of colors, and the blues and sometimes the browns and the reds as well. When you do get into those darker colors, as long as you're wary of that the color of the apparel may not or may bleed through and distort your image, when you do work with that material, we suggest working with darker inks or darker images, like a black may show up okay on red fabrics, things of that nature. It is kind of a test and go type of procedure.
True. Can I save a copy of the design to my PC, or only in the cloud with Creative Studio? Only in the cloud. You can print to the PC, but it saves in the cloud. So after you print the image, then you use the standard heat press to apply to substrate. Yes, it does not require a special press. There are special presses for things like mugs, and there's cap presses and things of that nature, but it's a standard heat press. And there's a lot of different variations of standard heat presses, I should add. Does updating the software, the Creative Studio software, has charges? No. And being that the Creative Studio is online, when it's updated, it's just done automatically. The only thing that you ever have to physically update is your print and color manager, okay? Because that's software that's downloaded and installed on your local computer. But as far as the Creative Studio itself is in the cloud, and with Creative Studio in the cloud, anytime changes are made, it's automatic. Can you use the HD ink with the SG800? Actually, that's the only ink for the SG800. The only ink for SG800 and SG400 is the Sublejet HD ink. All right, it's the top of the hour. I know there's still a few other questions rolling in, but you know what? HeatPressNation, man, you can give them a call anytime, and Jimmy and his staff will be glad to help you out with any questions that you do have. Jimmy, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to give a presentation, and I hope that everyone learned a little bit about Virtuoso and Creative Studio. And as always, you have questions, let us know.
Yes, Jimmy, thank you so much for your help. You are such a wealth of information. So we hope our audience here had learned a little bit and is able to move forward with the education that Jimmy Lamb was able to provide. Of course, if you have any questions on this, definitely feel free to reach out by email, by chat, or by phone, of course, and we're happy to help you in that regard. Thanks again for taking the time out of your day. Till next time.